Today's episode, Dr. Jeremy Franklin, and here we go. In the year 2009 AD, he was stationed at the Icarus base when it fell under attack by what some people suspect were the Lucine Alliance. Instead of gating back to Earth, Dr. Nicholas Rush dialed the 9th chevron address, which sent Franklin, among others, to the Destiny, an ancient starship. He was assigned to a team to search the ship, while the life support system was failing. After finding a leak among a compromised ancient shuttle, and the airlock can only be closed from the inside, Franklin was asked to repair the system from the outside. Despite numerous attempts, he could not find a way to shut it down. One of the pressures he dealt with was when Senator Alan Armstrong held him and Master Sergeant Ronald Greer at gunpoint, demanding to get inside the shuttle and close it manually. Not wanting someone to sacrifice himself, he kept trying to close off the area, but then admitted that he could not close it. He witnessed Armstrong sacrifice himself to save everyone on the ship for at least 24 hours. Later, Rush apparently told the ship about the life support system, and in response, the ship flew within the Stargate range of a desert planet, which contained a material required to repair the CO2 scrubbers. Franklin was one of 7 people selected to go to the planet. On the planet, he teamed up with Sergeant Curtis, Adria Palmer, and Eli Wallace, while Lieutenant Matthew Scott, Greer, and Rush went elsewhere. After a fruitless search for the lime they seek on repairing the CO2 scrubbers, Franklin, Curtis, and Palmer elected to dial one of the other 4 planets relatively near Destiny's range, even though Rush said the planets were locked out for a reason. They chose not to listen and go ahead. Franklin had the team's only remote control, and leaving the planet would strand the rest of the expedition. By the time Greer and Rush arrived, Curtis and Palmer already went through the Stargate. Before Franklin could leave, Greer shot him in the shoulder. He was taken back aboard Destiny, where his wounds were treated by Lieutenant Tamara Johansen. During his recovery and after power failed on the ship, he asked Eli Wallace why the power failed, though he didn't have the answers. After Destiny recharged itself, he noticed the lights turning back on, and asked Colonel Everett Young why it came back on, but he had no answers. A few days later, half of the ship's water reserves were depleted by the swarm Lieutenant Matthew Scott unknowingly brought back with him from the desert planet. Before the crew were made aware of this, Franklin believed that the military population had hoarded supplies to control the civilian population. Later, he noticed Master Sergeant Ronald Greer searching Chloe Armstrong's quarters to see if anyone stole the water. He resented this search, but this provoked Greer to search his quarters next. He later attempted to complain about Greer's attitude to Colonel Everett Young. However, Young seemed to ignore him, as did the other issues from Dr. Lisa Park and Dr. Dale Volker. Sometime after the team went to the jungle planet, Franklin decided to start a hydroponics lab on the ship to grow some fresh fruits and vegetables, to replace the rations he found distasteful. However, at first, nothing would grow. Also, he was one of the only people to undergo a psychiatric evaluation by Lieutenant Tamara Johansen. He was also forced to undergo fitness lessons led by Lieutenant Matthew Scott, but he found them difficult, especially when Sergeant Spencer was in charge. He later innocently bumped into Spencer, whose attitude by then had deteriorated. Despite being apologetic, Spencer went into an altercation with him, but was stopped abruptly by Colonel Everett Young. He returned to the hydroponics lab after the incident and was happy to see some of the seeds starting to grow. When Colonel Everett Young was forced to step down from command of Destiny due to being the prime subject in the murder of Sergeant Spencer, Camille Ray was put in charge. Ray gave Nicholas Rush permission to head a research team which included Franklin. The team's primary focus was the Destiny's interface chair. Franklin was working alone on a late shift when Eli Wallace entered the room. After a brief conversation, he asked Eli to bring him some food. In the time that Eli was gone, despite implicit orders not to use the device, Franklin sat in the chair. When Eli returned, he found Franklin convulsing in the chair, with the device electrodes cut into his temples. Unable to remove Franklin from the device, Eli called for help. When the device finally disconnected itself, Franklin fell to the floor convulsing and later went into a deep catatonic state. Ray, while still in charge, ordered Lieutenant Tamara Johansen to give Franklin a high dose of lorazepam, despite not knowing what the effects it may have. Franklin was still in a coma as of the second time the interface device was used. Later, when Destiny entered the void between the two galaxies, Franklin awoke from his coma, but was still unresponsive. When one of the ship's faster-than-light engines was sabotaged, he was cared for by Lieutenant Vanessa James, as many people were hurt during the explosion and the infirmary was overrun with injured expedition members. James believed Franklin to be more aware than was made to appear, and as she fed him, she explained the situation. During this time, the Chappa'ai race managed to locate Destiny and began an attack. Franklin struggled but managed to speak, telling her the chair, which prompted her to interrupt Dr. Nicholas Rush and Colonel Everett Young, as Young was about to use the Destiny interface chair. They instead asked Franklin to sit in the chair for a second time, to which he agreed. As he connected to the device, cold air was pumped into the room, rapidly reducing the temperature. Young ordered Sergeant Hunter Riley to guard the door to the room as he went to deal with the ensuing attack. However, the battle was short, as Franklin soon commanded the ship to re-enter FTL. When Young returned to the room, Franklin had disappeared, as the ship downloaded his consciousness into its mainframe. Young ordered a search, but eventually called it off. Destiny later created an avatar using his consciousness to appear to Dr. Nicholas Rush, to convey messages of Destiny's AI and discourage his reckless attempts to control the ship by himself. Rush eventually deactivated it, but it inspired him to download Jin and Dr. Amanda Perry into the ship like he had been.